Let's go ahead and talk about the distance formula and how we can find the distance between 2 points when you're given their coordinates. So let's go ahead and start off with writing down what the distance formula is. And the distance formula can be derived using the Pythagorean theorem. So it's going to be all under the square root. And what I'm going to do is I take the difference between the two x coordinates and I square it, and then I add that result to the difference of the two y coordinates, and I also square that as well. And we can use this distance formula to help us find the distance between the 2 points that we have here. So I'm going to label my points as my x1 and y1, and my x2 and y sub 2. And it doesn't really matter which one you make your x sub 1 and x sub 2. Okay, so I have identified my two x coordinates that I'm going to be taking the difference of. And here are my two y coordinates that I'm going to be taking the difference of. And I've shown you guys where I'm going to be replacing into the distance formula. All right, so let's go ahead and just briefly set it up. And I'm going to do it directly how I see it in the distance formula. So if I have my x sub 2 minus, and I know there's a minus sign inside the formula, and although my x sub 1 is also negative, I need to include that minus sign because it's part of the formula. So I'm going to end up with the case that I have a double negative. On the difference between the two y coordinates, I'm not going to end up with a double negative because the number that comes after the minus sign, it's positive. So let's go ahead and clean this up. Inside the first parentheses, now we're going to have addition instead of subtraction. And inside the second parentheses, I don't have any double negatives, so I'm just going to go ahead and subtract. Once I simplify that inside of the first parentheses, I get a squared and bring down my 4 to the second power. So a squared just means I'm going to multiply a times a, which is 64. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. Then I'm going to go ahead and add those two numbers, and I'm going to get 80. Then this is where we're going to use our calculator to get an approximation of the square root of 80, since 80 is not a perfect square. So the square root of it will be something that's close to 9, because 9 times 9 is 81. After rounding to the nearest hundreds, the distance between those 2 points is 8.94, approximately 8.94, once rounding to, if you round to the nearest hundreds.